And so what we're going to talk about in the next section is just a little bit about how these experiences can be brought into email. And I'm going to go relatively quickly through some high-level brand experiences. And then we're going to talk to Veronica from Planet Beauty, and that's going to be way more interesting than what I'm talking about because she has a lot of really awesome firsthand experience growing a brand at a meteoric rate in 2020, and I think that's just about as interesting as it gets when talking about omnichannel. We can talk about the features, but we want to see how it actually all comes together. So moving on to the next slide. Thank you very much. So there's this dream, and I wouldn't call it a myth because it is possible, but it's hard. But there's this dream that I always hear being sold of like a true omnichannel, true single view of the customer. And I think what people don't always mention is that it's pretty hard. There are 6 different touch points that most customers will interact with when they're engaging with your brand. And typically all these systems are disconnected. And it poses a really big challenge for brands, as I'm sure most of you have felt, because typically these systems don't talk to each other, they're disconnected. In my job at Klaviyo, I work on figuring out these integrations and deploying them for brands. And so I can tell you firsthand, most tools do not integrate well together. And so when you find tools that integrate well together, that can often be the biggest determinant of true success for getting that one view of the customer and true success when you're trying to figure out how you can actually implement an omni-channel strategy. Way easier to talk about, harder to actually implement, as I'm sure you know. So moving on, I just want to quickly touch on why it's actually important to think about this in terms of revenue, which is of course our main goal here. And so the first number is 3 times is the amount that a segmented and personalized email or SMS marketing campaign will perform compared to a more generic communication. This is not new. This was established early in email that those billboard approach to emails are just not a good strategy. And when you think about what personalization means in the context of omnichannel, it's about recognizing purchases from both online and in-store, segmenting your customers based on the store they go to. It's not necessarily complicated stuff, but if you don't do it, you're going to come off as tone deaf to your customers, and they're just not going to engage at the same rate. And they will engage at exactly 1/3 the rate that they would if you just took the time to personalize a bit. The next thing is actually 30%. So increase in overall revenue from omnichannel customers. This is from a report that a partner Adyen put together. And I like this report a lot actually because it actually takes into account that omnichannel customers always buy twice. If you bought omnichannel, you had to have bought from at least 2 times. And sometimes I see people not realizing that when they make these studies. So I like this number because it's very realistic. If you implement omnichannel strategies, it's reasonable to expect somewhere in this neighborhood of lift from just kind of recognizing the channels your customers come through, cross-selling, and increasing that personalization. So I want to actually talk about specific brand experiences because I think one thing I see happen is when we spend, if I were to spend too much time talking about the high-level approaches, it just gets too abstract and we can't actually see what brands have done to be really successful in doing this. And it's not rocket science. There are some interesting things that can be done. You can get really complicated in how you build your segments and how you build your flows in your email tool. But the most basic strategies will unlock a ton of value immediately. So if you're not doing some of these things at all, even just doing a test will show you that there's a lot of engagement that can come out of these types of strategies. So at the risk of just repeating myself, because I'm about to talk about all of these again, I just want to jump into the first brand example. And this is about a concept that I'm sure most people have heard about for the first time in 2020. I don't think buy online, pick up in store was ever as hot as it was in 2020 when we started to see mass closures of brick and mortar stores. And I think in a lot of ways, it kind of kept brick and mortar relevant at a time when we absolutely could not use brick and mortar in the same way we always have. And so I want to call it Mexicali Blues. I've actually had the pleasure to work with them a little bit, helping them with their teamwork, retail, and Klaviyo integration. And so you can see that that they're doing things to incorporate an understanding of, one, customer behavior across channels, and two, specific transactional type communications around buy online, pick up in store. So the first one is looking at both online purchases and in-store purchases when they're considering who are their best customers. And this is what I would consider a level 1 strategy that can unlock a ton of value, because we are all trying to figure out who our best customers are. We're trying to figure out where we're going to get the most impact from communications and from getting our customers to move along in their buyer's journey towards those really high LTV evangelist type customers. And if you only ever consider your customers from the perspective of one channel, you're going to miss out on these customers who love your brand, and they love it so much that they're buying from you everywhere they can. So they're going in store and they're going online. But if your segment only looks at online or in store independently, you're not going to realize that you have these true, really kind of VIP customers that you should be communicating with. And so that's one strategy that Mexicali Blues tried out, which is really effective. The next one is a transactional one, but if you don't send these emails, again, this is a basic strategy. Oh, sorry, going back to that buy online in store. Sorry, I gave you a false flag on switching slides. If you don't send a communication about your buy online, pick up in store, your customer is going to be incredibly confused, and you're going to have increase in support tickets and customer confusion. They're not going to want to do it again. So this is a very basic strategy, easy to set up, but if you don't do it, it has a really big impact on customer experience. It'd be great to move to the next slide. Thank you. So looking at Kierna Zabet, so they focus on a few things. So the first is segmentation based on past behavior, which I want to get into in a little bit of a different way than in the last example. So what you can see here is specific store kind of targeting. And this is something you can also do with the Klaviyo Teamwork Retail integration. We actually just figured out the best way to do this recently. And what you can see here is they're really kind of trying to show that there's a person that's going to be there in store for you. Not only is it just a person, it's the store director, and with a brand like Kierna Zabet, where there's a huge focus on style and design and high fashion, this is something that can be a real differentiator for someone who's about to spend a few $100s on a hat or a jacket. And so this kind of personalization shows that you've paid attention to where the customer shops. You can send them relevant store-based communication. So if the Soho location has a product, and you can tell the customer specifically about that product and not worry about miscommunicating because you accidentally told someone who goes to your Palm Beach location about it. The next thing is you can encourage repeat purchases based on specific products purchased. So we get this really rich event-based data from Teamwork Retail, and basically you can use this to say, okay, I know someone bought a hat from me in the past. I want to send them products that are relevant to that product. And there's some cool approaches there that Kierna is taking advantage of. And then, as we discussed, knowing the person's preferred store, or what we can imply is their preferred store if they shop there a number of times, you can just make sure that you're communicating to them only the most relevant information and limiting the amount of noise that they might get exposed to from your brand. Awesome. So, and moving on to, again, the most important part of this conversation, and we'll hear a lot more from Veronica in just a moment, but so Planet Beauty is doing a really important strategy here, which is just recognizing who's an online customer and who's an in-store customer. If you do nothing else, this is the most impactful email strategy for an omnichannel brand. Just recognize who's shopping where, and when you send them a promotion, know what you're trying to get them to do. You could hypothetically send an online customer an in-store promotion with the idea that you want to drive that omnichannel experience. But if you don't think that's going to work, or you tested it and you know your customers don't actually respond to that, then you want to at least be aware of how you are approaching those strategies. So both can work, but for your brand, you need to identify, will your in-store customers respond to online, and will your in-store customers respond to in-store promotions, and vice versa.